This program this morning is on SB 52, the California DISCLOSE Act, that follows on the AB 1648 that came before it. This woman has given a huge portion of her life over the past few years to get this passed in California. I see it as one of the most important issues that we as a state and we as a nation face, that we recognize that our democracy is very incomplete, and this is one of the barriers to it being a fully functioning democracy. So I'm proud and honored to introduce Nancy Neff.
Thank you very much, Paul. That was very sweet. And I just want to very briefly introduce our main speaker today. Laurel McClure is going to talk about herself a little bit in her talk. So I just want to say I met Laurel at the Unitarian Universalist Church, and she came to volunteer at a mailing party that we had for the California DISCLOSE Act. And I overheard her from the next table speaking so articulately about the issues that I thought, I want to recruit Laurel as a speaker. And I succeeded in doing that. She came also to an inequality for all discussion that we had, and again was so articulate that I'm delighted to introduce Laurel today as our speaker. And we'll both be available for questions and answers after Laurel speaks. Laurel.
I can manage to work the one button on this little device. I'm a little bit of a technophobe. My husband works at HP, so I have sort of in-house IT support, and that has enabled me to get along learning virtually nothing about computers. I may be able to change a slide or two on here. So, I was going to start with a bit of a self-introduction. My name is Laurel McClure. I'm a longtime neighbor of yours, having lived in Silicon Valley now for something over 30 years, kind of orbiting around Stanford University, I guess, first Palo Alto, then Menlo Park, and eventually, 25 years ago, I settled in downtown Mountain View, where I now live with my family. I am a mom. I have a son who is in his second year of college in Wisconsin, of all places, and a daughter who is just finishing up 8th grade at Graham Middle School and is looking forward to her first year of high school, I think with some trepidation, this fall. I'm also a physician. I work currently at Valley Medical Center in San Jose, and I love the opportunity that position gives me to work with and teach young doctors in training, as well as to take care of people who've come from all around the world to settle here in Silicon Valley in search of the many, many opportunities to be found here, whether in work, investment, employment, or education. And most recently, I am a volunteer with California Clean Money, and it is on their behalf that I'm speaking to you today. This is my first presentation for them. So, who or what is California Clean Money? Some of you may well already be aware of this organization. Who's heard of California Clean Money before? Okay. Well, until recently, I hadn't, but Nancy recruited me, as she said. You probably realize then that California Clean Money is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group that has dedicated itself for more than a dozen years now to fighting the dominance of big money in the California political system. It is not by any stretch of the imagination the only group trying to make our democracy work better for the average voter. California Clean Money has many allies, groups like the League of Women Voters, Common Cause. There are increasing numbers of groups who are concerned and trying to address some of these same issues. It is a grassroots organization with 15 working groups and more than 80,000 supporters across the state of California who are working very, very hard to try to ensure that elections in California are won and not bought. So, why have I, a working mom, busy like every working mom with general staff meetings, carpools, phoning my clients, which is to say patients with the results of their recent thyroid biopsy, overseeing homework, just getting dinner on the table. So why was it important to me to participate in this effort to blunt the effects that almost unlimited and virtually unregulated money are having on our political system. I have to start by giving a shout out to my dad. He died about a year ago. He was a graphic designer by trade, but by avocation, a passionate citizen, a small d Democrat. He served on our city council, which we called a borough council, for some 9 years. And in his retirement, after he retired from the borough council, he helped to found an environmental organization, the Clearwater Conservancy, still doing good work in central Pennsylvania protecting watersheds. But it was really a more recent experience with my mom that pushed me into doing something more now than just voting. My mom is now 90. She still lives on her own. She does much of her own yard work, although this past winter in particular, she did need some help with the shoveling. However, her doctor told her about a year ago that it was time for her to stop driving. She was very annoyed, very disgruntled, but nonetheless, she mailed in her driver's license to the Pennsylvania equivalent of the DMV, PennDOT. When I visited her last summer, she asked me to help her get a new photo ID. It turned out that she might need a photo ID to vote, because Pennsylvania had just recently passed a law requiring voters to show an official photo ID at the polls. Even though she'd been a registered voter her whole life, even though she had been living at the same address on Hamilton Avenue since the 1960s, she was going to have to show an official photo ID at the polls. Even though there has never, to my knowledge, been a single case of in-person voter fraud in Center County, Pennsylvania. So I looked up the PennDOT website, and as I read the requirements on the website for obtaining an official photo ID, I could just feel my blood pressure rising. She had to have an original birth certificate stamped by the relevant county official in wherever you may happen to have been born. For her, that was Eastern Kentucky. She grew up in Appalachia. A marriage license, just in case, say, the name you were born with isn't the one you have now. And please notice the discriminatory effect on women with that provision. Current utility bills, tax records to verify your residence in a given precinct. Now, it happens my mom is a pack rat. She has, I don't really think I can call it a system of organizing documents. It's completely opaque, certainly to the rest of us, but she does keep everything. So she made her way somewhat laboriously down the basement stairs and a couple of hours later emerged, dusty, tired, but triumphant, with a box of yellowing documents, including my dad's World War II military discharge papers, which I had never seen before, and her own birth certificate stamped, and her marriage license, which I also had never seen before. I didn't know she was married in Toledo, Ohio, but now I do. She's since misplaced the marriage certificate, but not before I took her to the next town over, by the way, because just like here, they don't have DMVs in every town anymore, to get her brand new official photo ID. But how many people could have done that? What about people who haven't lived in the same house for 40 years? What about people who don't keep every document from their whole lifetime in boxes in the basement? What about poorer people who've moved from job to job, rental to rental, who are scrabbling to pay rent and utility bills and put food on the table? Where are they going to find the time and money and energy to order and pay for documents they may well have left behind decades ago? What about immigrants from other countries, naturalized citizens? What does it entail for them to get an original birth certificate? Will they need to have it translated, notarized? I don't really know what the provisions are in the Pennsylvania law. But I do know that there are a lot of voters, especially among the poor, the elderly, women, immigrants, people of color, for whom this bill will raise hurdles that may well make it impossible for them to vote. Now, I had read about these voter ID laws. They have been enacted in quite a few states in the past few years, especially in so-called swing states for national elections. Pennsylvania is sometimes considered a swing state. Where do they come from? Why are they popping up in so many places at the same time? It turns out that they have been promoted across the country by moneyed interests acting largely out of the public view, through a host of organizations acting under our radar. Many of the voter ID laws nationwide originated in a group called the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, which is funded by corporations, including, alas, our own Facebook, Google, and Apple recently, and by wealthy private individuals like the Koch brothers. I started to pay a little more attention to the effects that anonymous money is having on our political system. So I no longer live in Pennsylvania, not for quite some time. California, thankfully, has not enacted a voter ID law. But that does not mean that big money, largely out of public view, is not calling many of the shots in our state, just as it does across the country in Pennsylvania and elsewhere. California has this great form of direct democracy, the ballot proposition. It was the bane of my experience, to tell the truth, as a voter. When I first moved here at age 22, I was brought up to believe that I should really educate myself about all the issues and all the candidates before I went to the ballot. And there was a lot more on the California ballot than there had been in Pennsylvania, I have to tell you. So much information to wade through before casting my vote. Through the proposition, we can enact laws directly without relying on elected representatives, except private money from corporations, special interests, and wealthy individuals is very active indeed in shaping which propositions get on the ballot and which ones pass. That means that we, as Californians, are, if anything, even more vulnerable to the effects of anonymous or dark money than people are elsewhere. We all know that money has been a big part of politics at every level ever since money and politics have existed. However, I think most of you are aware that our political system in this historical moment is being swamped with more money than ever before in the wake of recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions that have opened wide the floodgates. So, Citizens United. I think you've heard of it. By a 5-4 decision, the U.S. Supreme Court lifted all limits on so-called outside spending by corporations, unions, or wealthy individuals. Ever since that decision, our elections nationwide have been awash in money. In 2012, which was after the Citizens United decision, super PACs and secretive nonprofits spent more than $1 billion through groups with names like Americans for Prosperity, Crossroads GPS, Restore Our Future, Priorities USA. The names are pretty, and also pretty opaque, aren't they? So what exactly do they stand for? Whose interests do they represent? The nonprofits among these groups never have to reveal their donors, either during the election season or after. That is what has come to be known as dark money, and its influence has grown by leaps and bounds over the past few election cycles. Just this month, April 2014, the McCutcheon decision, again by the U.S. Supreme Court, again a 5-4 split decision by the justices, is going to accelerate this trend even more, cranking the floodgates open even wider if possible. McCutcheon says that the wealthy can contribute the maximum amount to as many different candidates across the country as they want, altogether doing away with the limit on total campaign contributions. So what does this mean for California, in our state? What effect has it had on our ballot propositions, our unique point of direct access to the legislative process? In 2012, $475 million was spent just on California ballot measures. The groups pouring money into ads meant to influence the electorate had names like Stop Special Interest Money Now, Do you think that means there wasn't any special interest money behind those groups and their ads? Okay, how about this one for an example? The 2012 Auto Insurance Discounts Act. Sounds good. Who do you think put that initiative on the ballot? Does anybody know or have a guess? Yeah?
It was Mercury.
Yeah, he got it. I didn't know that. The chairman of Mercury Insurance. No one would have known that, though, by watching the ads. Might that have changed your impression of what that proposition was meant to accomplish, if you had known that? California Clean Money has several long-term goals through which it aims to clean up our political process, first at the state level and then, we hope, at the national level. First, we're promoting the California DISCLOSE Act to disclose the special interests and wealthy individuals who hide behind the anonymity of super PACs and dark money nonprofit groups. Clean Money also supports public financing of elections to make elected officials accountable to voters rather than to wealthy individuals and special interest groups. Lastly, we hope to undo Citizens United and other recent Supreme Court decisions to affirm that money is not just another form of speech, to level the playing field for all voters. Today, we are going to focus on disclosure because this year we are looking to pass the California DISCLOSE Act, SB 52. It has already passed the California Senate, and it is due to come up for a vote in the Assembly this summer. Interestingly, one of the most conservative of the Supreme Court justices is on record as favoring disclosure. I'm going to read you a quote from Antonin Scalia from 2010. Requiring people to stand up in public for their political acts fosters civic courage, without which democracy is doomed. For my part, I do not look forward to a society in which, thanks to the Supreme Court, campaigns anonymously exercise the direct democracy of initiative and referendum hidden from public scrutiny and protected from the accountability of criticism. I couldn't agree with him more. I wish I agreed with him on more points, but on that point I agree with him strongly. So, what exactly would the California DISCLOSE Act do? On any political ad, whether on TV, radio, or in print, it will clearly identify the top funders, stripping away the anonymity that allows them to use misdirection to influence voters. When voters are deluged with political ads, they will be able to see just who is paying for them. I'm going to give you a couple of examples to illustrate. In 2010, there was a ballot measure called Prop 26. Any of you remember Prop 26? I didn't remember it. It was a nice, quiet little proposition with an enormous effect. Here's one of their ads. Yes on 26, they say, means voter approval for higher taxes. What it did was it required a 2/3 vote in the state legislature, or even in a city council, to raise any fees on anyone, including, say, a polluting industry. How easy is it to get a 2/3 vote? Some of you may have tried to get a 2/3 vote on a school bond or something. It's a lot of work. It's very hard. Prop 26 passed with 52% of the vote. If you took the trouble to read all the fine print down there, it's not very easy to read on your TV, you would have seen that it was paid for by an innocuous-sounding group called Stop Hidden Taxes. Sounds great. Who would be in favor of hidden taxes? Not me. So who was really behind Prop 26? The California DISCLOSE Act would require TV ads to show the top 3 funders very clearly and very prominently on the bottom 1/3 of the screen in a large font with a black background for a full 5 seconds. For Prop 26, this is what it would have looked like. And it would have read, top funders for this ad are Chevron, Philip Morris, and Anheuser-Busch. That's who was behind Stop Hidden Taxes. Raise your hand if you think that 2% of the voters might have changed their vote if they knew that Stop Hidden Taxes was actually Chevron and Philip Morris. 2%. Yeah, it could have swung the balance in that vote. I think so too. That's the potential impact of the California DISCLOSE Act. SB 52 will also require disclosure on radio ads. You know how radio ads at present use these, I'm sure they're specially trained speed readers, you know, that guy. Paid for by Stop Hidden Taxes, a coalition of tax, blah, 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 right? Replace him with simple, intelligible language. In this case, top funders of this ad are Chevron and Philip Morris. Paid for by Stop Hidden Taxes, yes on 26. Same duration. They made it two top funders instead of 3 to make it fit. Disclosure would be required to be clear and brief. Disclosure would also be required on those mass mailers we all get in the mail. It applies to print ads, billboards, online ads, websites for or against state and local ballot measures. It will cover third-party ads, including sham issue ads for or against candidates. It doesn't apply just to ballot measures. It will also follow the money, requiring ads to report the original corporation, union, or individual who donated the money, diluting the effect of those misleading committee and nonprofit names. The California DISCLOSE Act would definitely change our political system here in California, giving voters more of what they need to make an informed choice at the poll. It's going to encounter tremendous opposition. It already has. However, we've already gotten it through the California Senate on a bipartisan vote because of a huge and growing movement that includes lots of informed and concerned voters just like you. More than 100,000 people have signed petitions urging the legislature to pass the California DISCLOSE Act. We're circulating petitions among you today. Please sign one. If you want, you can take a petition home and have family members or friends sign it and mail it into the address on the bottom. Thousands of people have also made phone calls to representatives, and we have packed the halls of the legislature in Sacramento whenever this bill has come into committee or to a floor vote. All of that does have an impact. You can participate in any and all of those efforts yourself if you have the energy and inclination. This summer is a crucial time for this bill. Having passed the Senate, it now goes to the Assembly. The Assembly Elections Committee will vote on it in June. The bill must get through the Assembly by the end of August. It amends the Political Reform Act of 1974, and that does require a 2/3 vote. There are many wealthy special interests who would very much like to continue hiding when they pay for political ads. They are likely to bring their money and influence to bear to oppose it. But you have influence too. That's why we need your help now. I was inspired when I went to your website and read some of the statements of principle that the Humanist community have published. Sena Havasi wrote, "Creative ability and personal responsibility thrive best within free democracies." Martin Squibbs expresses concern that our economic system is now so manipulated by the lending and printing of money that real wealth and value, the Earth's resources, can become largely forgotten. He goes on to issue a call to action. This is our life in the making. It is the only effect we ever have as we live it and breathe right now. And so, to act now with relevant knowledge and understanding in mind, with a will to do what is right, and with a view to moving towards a better future, is surely what we must and all we can do. Let us do so together, and let us do so now. We're circulating packets among you. Nancy's going to bring some around, and I'll just go over what's in the packets. They give you information about SB 52, and they highlight actions that you could take to help support its passage this summer. And when you get a packet, have a look at what's in it. The first page is an information page, front and back, that gives you, it's an overview of the details of SB 52. It also gives you links to the California Clean Money website for more information. The second page is an I support form, the yellow page. If you support SB 52 and would like to volunteer in any capacity for this summer's campaign, please fill out this yellow page right now. Turn it in to me or Nancy before you leave. Options for volunteering are many. You can gather signatures, you can make phone calls. There's a wonderful phone call system. Our senator and assembly member, of course, are all over this bill. Our senator was one of the originators of it. And so there's a phone system, however, that will connect you to a supporter of this bill in what we would call a swing district. If you get one of our supporters on the phone, you can then connect them directly to their own assembly member's office to make a call in support of the bill. I signed up as a Facebook supporter. That just means that whenever California Clean Money posts a petition to sign or information about some upcoming event, I favorite that, and I post it on my own Facebook account so that more people will see it. So you can help out on Facebook or other social media. You can go to Sacramento to attend a hearing. I'm thinking I may do that this summer because I think it sounds kind of fun. Field trip. There's also a spot that you could sign to make a donation or to sign on as a monthly donor. The California Clean Money campaign is completely supported by grassroots donors like us. It doesn't take any corporate money, any union money. Let's see, I wrote down here somewhere where I think California, you could tell me, Nancy, how to make out a check if somebody decides to write a check today.
California Clean Money Action Fund.
Okay, yeah, here I have it. The California Clean Money Action Fund, and Nancy also has envelopes that are already addressed if you were inspired to write a check, and we could send it in for you today. Anything you could give, anything you can do would be greatly appreciated. The third sheet that we have is a petition for SB 52. Sign it now if you haven't signed one already. And for some reason I hear that, kind of hand-signed petitions have more impact in the legislature than the ones that we all do online these days. You can also take a petition with you if you like. Get other people to fill it out, mail it into the address on the bottom. I think I mentioned that already. And then the last page, we have the address and some talking points for people who could use some letters. The Assembly Speaker, John Perez, and the Assembly Speaker-elect, Tony Atkins, will have a lot of influence in what happens to this bill as it works its way through the Assembly. Handwritten letters, like hand-signed petitions, seem to have much more of an impact. They often end up on the desk of the Speaker as opposed to just being tallied by some aide. So if you could take just a few minutes and write a letter. I think at one of these recent events I took 5 minutes and I wrote 2 letters. We have envelopes, we have stamps, we have addresses. That also is volunteering, and that also has an impact. So if you could write one today, however brief, it'll make a difference. So I'm going to take a few minutes to answer any questions. I may refer any devilish detailed questions to Nancy because she's been at this much longer than I have. But anybody have any questions about the SB 52 or the process this year?
So we know how this, we're changing the way this works. So remember, wait for the microphone. Laura is going to pass around numbers, and we're going to then call on the people in numeric order. Okay, does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so who's the first person? Brian?
Oh, yeah.
So if you have a question as this is going on, just raise your hand and I'll give you a number, and then Carl will come around.
Thanks for a great talk, Laura.
Thank you, Brian.
I was just going to ask you, I thought I had heard Trent Lang, the president of the California Clean Money Campaign, say at a meeting I was at that disclosure of Chevron, Philip Morris, and Anheuser-Busch would come at the beginning of the ad. Is that true? Because now it's normally shown at the end, but I thought he had said maybe it would be at the beginning, which I think is much better to let people know right from the start who paid for the ad. But I was just wondering if you knew about that.
Yeah, I believe that it's going to be there on the ad as the ad is airing. Is that correct, Nancy? Yeah. At the beginning. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Right
Okay,
up front.
who's number 2? I saw a hand go up, but I didn't see where it was.
Over there on the back.
So raise your number when you get it.
I just want to make a comment. I think the larger issue is the clean money thing. So this is a step in that direction, I think, which makes sense. But I just want to say that I hear people, even from the Supreme Court, say, this is a question of free speech. People should have the right to spend their money to get their ideas on TV. But that's expensive speech. It's not free speech. It's like, yeah, you're free if you can. It's free if you can pay for it. So I think that's kind of it's not oxymoron there. So that's all I want to say.
I couldn't agree with you more. And California Clean Money does, in fact, support the efforts that are underway to roll back Citizens United in the McCutcheon decision. We think that'll take more time. We do think that knowing who is behind the money does have an impact.
I think this is great, and I appreciate your coming to talk about it. I was sitting here, though, trying to figure out how the corporations would get around it, and I suppose, are there mechanisms in place for Chevron, so that if Chevron sets up an entirely different entity, and that they can't just put the name of that entity on the ad?
There is an amendment, and I am sure, just as you are, that the corporations are scrutinizing this bill, looking for any possible loophole in it. But the amendment is, there's a follow the money amendment, in which no matter how many times the money is moved, it is to be traced back to the original donor, whether it's a corporation, a union, or a wealthy private individual. And there have been, I have seen in previous elections in California, there have been, money sent to someplace on the East Coast and then it's brought back in here. That kind of thing does go on. But the law, at least, will be that no matter how many times that money has been moved, it goes back to the original donor.
Your presentation emphasized ballot measures. Does this also apply to candidates?
It does apply to candidates as well, yes.
Okay, and the other thing is, unions are also major contributors to campaigns. What is their position on this?
Well, the unions are mixed. They also like to not necessarily have their names up front on everything that they're giving money to, but this is the way you make it a bipartisan bill. It really has to apply to everybody. And, I think that if it's presented as an issue of disclosure, you will find both Republicans and Democrats supporting more information in the political process. It's really hard for anybody on either side to argue that more information is a bad thing.
I was really surprised to hear what you said about what Antonin Scalia said. I don't suppose it's possible to know how he voted in Citizens United and McCutcheon. Oh
yes, he voted in favor of both those decisions. So it is known for sure.
He was one of the four that were outvoted, huh?
So what he's saying is, and actually that quote is back from 2010. Before Citizens United, and it applied to another decision. However, he has said that he thinks that there should be disclosure of what you support in the public arena. And so he, at least in theory, he does think that money is speech and corporations are people. He voted on those decisions. Nancy, you had something you wanted a comment to make?
More to say about that, yeah.
Okay. Maybe a mic.
Yeah, to get into a little more nitty-gritty detail on the Citizens United decision, it had two parts. The 5-4 decision was one part, but there was a part 2 which talked directly about disclosure, and 8 out of 9 justices agreed in that part, including Scalia, that disclosure is necessary and proper in order for people to understand, where the money is coming from and who's trying to influence them. So only Justice, can anybody guess which justice was the only one to vote against disclosure?
Thomas.
Yep, Thomas.
Yeah, so there is in fact strong bipartisan support for disclosure, and so I think that's why we have a good chance of getting it passed, and also of it withstanding court challenge.
There are 2 groups that I send money to for amending the Constitution. One is called Move to Amend, and the other is called Wolf Pack. And they have had success on and off with, I'd say, about 20 states to raise a constitutional committee, or what do you call it, convention. So if you need two groups to lobby, send money to, maybe 10 or 20 bucks a month to, it would be Wolfpack and Move to Amend.
Yeah, I support Move to Amend also, and that is certainly one of California Clean Money's long-term goals as well. We think it'll take a while longer maybe to achieve that amendment, but we're supporting those efforts too.
You mentioned the various voting rights problems that have erupted across the country. You're really focusing only on California, right? Are there other groups that are attempting to clear up these onerous requirements for voting?
Yeah, the voting rights, yeah, that's a kind of a personal thing for me, obviously. So that's not an issue here in California, so California Disclose Act is not personally tackling that. I know the ACLU is. Do you know anything more about efforts in that direction to address voting rights?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't kept up on the details.
There are efforts in all of the states that are being affected by these voter ID laws to tackle that problem. And nationwide, I know the ACLU is bringing some of the legal challenges. Often what will happen is a legal group will be able to get a stay. That's what happened in Pennsylvania, in fact. The law was challenged. So although my mom was having to get a voter ID, the law had not yet been implemented in Pennsylvania. It had passed, but there was a legal stay on it. And however, at the polls, it turns out that's confusing to the poll workers. Some of the poll workers, you know, there's just these volunteers. Some of them thought that people were supposed to have a photo ID, even though there was a stay on the law. So. But there are groups all around the country in the affected states. Voter laws are state by state. And that means that what happens in your state really matters. And one of the things I've come to appreciate, you know, as I've seen these changes in our political system is a lot of, you know, things like voter laws and disclosure laws, all of that happens at the state level. So we really need to pay attention to what's happening in our state. I think California has the opportunity really to be a leader in this area, and I think if we can get disclosure laws passed here, we may be able to propagate that across the country. There are efforts to get disclosure laws passed at the national level as well. It's harder there because the national level is in gridlock right now. So. But we have a good chance of passing this law in California this summer, and I think if we do that, we can set an example for states and the national level as well.
So I wasn't aware of the Supreme Court issue that you just discussed, of 8 out of 9 of them going for disclosure. And how does that relate to this issue? Why are we also having to do this?
Maybe, can you answer that one, Nancy?
Yes, the Supreme Court can make a ruling on what is constitutional, but the Supreme Court does not write laws.
Right.
So no matter what the Supreme Court says is constitutional, it's not going to be in laws until various legislatures pass those laws.
So that again comes back to the state level then. If it's a voting law, it has to be passed state by state.
Yeah, for state level, it has to be passed in every state. For federal level, it has to be passed in the Congress. For these laws, so if we pass this in California, this is written to apply to both state and local jurisdictions in California. It will not apply to federal races in California, to the Congress. So we still will need to get it passed in the National Congress for it to apply to our representative and senators at the federal level.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody else? I was going to ask a question if we don't have anybody else. You know, I remember one time, I guess sometimes I keep silly facts in my head, okay? England tried to do this. They gave up on it, as I understand it, because of the fuzz law. What happens is these organizations give money to another one and another one and another one and another one and another one, mix them all up, just like they did with the mortgage crisis. Mm-hmm. And then you can't figure out who it is that actually originated the money. I'm just asking the question, is there any way that this bill is going to prevent that?
Well, this bill does attempt to do that. There's an amendment called the Follow the Money Amendment. And proposes to do just that, to trace the money back to, you can bet there's going to be shell games and attempts to disguise where the money is coming from. But the law is going to state that the money is traced back to its original donor, and that's who will appear on the advertising.
I was curious about what kind of penalties are imposed if someone lies about who's paying for the ad or something.
I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to give that one to Nancy.
The penalties are the same penalties that already exist in California law. And this is amending the Political Reform Act of 1974, and the penalties that exist are up to a fine up to 3 times the cost of the ad buy. So these ad buys are millions of dollars, so there would be some pretty substantial fees. Where does the fine go to? I don't know. The California Fair Political Practices Commission, FPPC, is the one who levies the fine, and whether it goes to the general fund or somewhere else, I'm not sure.
I just had one question, just a quick one. Hilton just asked me, what's the effect if you sign more than one of these petitions?
It's no problem, because this is not a legal petition to put something on the ballot. This is a petition asking the legislature to pass it. So where this petition goes is to our volunteers doing data entry, and when we enter it into our data system, if you're already in there, then it shows up and it doesn't get double entered. So it's no problem. Many times people don't remember whether they've signed, or, you know, gee, was it for this bill or the previous bill, and we need you to sign for SB 52. You might have signed before, but it might have been our previous bill, AB 1648. So we do appreciate you signing again today, even if you're not absolutely sure that it was SB 52 that you signed for before.
This is a bit tangential, but I've been a poll worker for, I don't know, 15 years, I would guess. And I went down just to volunteer. You know, every good citizen ought to volunteer and help out. Turns out they pay you to do that. And they also have another nice provision in that they will allow you, when you sign up, if you don't really need the money, just put down your favorite nonprofit organization, and they'll send the check directly to that organization. The voting process itself is certainly central to this. They need more people right now. If you are free on election day and an hour or so and a couple of days before that, that are usually easy to schedule, I urge you to volunteer. You're paid about $100 if you're a poll worker, $180 or something if you're an inspector. It's also fun. I'd urge you to consider it. I can give you the contact information if you need it.
Okay, seems like we have, so far we don't have any more questions that we know about. Does anybody have one?
If there are no more questions, I have a couple of concluding remarks to wrap up, and a couple more examples that I wanted to highlight.
Okay, and then I want to make an announcement after that, so let me know when you're done.
All right. Oh yes, we want time to write letters, because if you can write even a 5-minute handwritten letter, we'll get that. We'll help you get that in the mail, and yeah, we want to leave a little time for that. So, and Nancy and I will be here at lunch to answer any more questions that may come up. But I wanted just to highlight a couple more examples to suggest the potential importance of this bill. How many of you know that California is the only oil-producing state that does not have an oil severance tax? Okay, quite a few of you. Okay. So that's a tax on oil extraction. Texas has such a tax, Alaska has one, but why not California? And probably some of you know this also. In 2006, there was a proposition on the ballot, Prop 87, which would have provided an oil severance tax. Maybe some of you worked on that campaign. It would have provided more money for clean energy investments. It was overwhelmingly popular in early polling until $94 million in ads by a group called Californians Against Higher Taxes came out. Prop 87 went down to defeat. So, who is behind Californians Against Higher Taxes? Anybody know? Since you guys seem pretty up on this issue, yeah? Right, Chevron, Era Energy, and Occidental Oil and Gas. That's what voters would have seen on the ads if SB 52 had been in place. Maybe we would no longer be the only oil-producing state without an oil severance tax. Prescription drug discounts, widely supported by consumer groups, were on the ballot in 2005 as Prop 79. This initiative, too, was wildly popular in the polls, understandably, as prescription drugs are wickedly expensive. Prop 79 would have changed that. Prior to the vote, California was flooded with $123 million from a group called Californians Against Out-of-Control Taxes and Spending. So who do you think was behind that one? Any takers on that? Prescription drug discounts? GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, and Pfizer. Humanists believe that action should be based on knowledge and guided by reason. It seems to me that makes you natural allies of the California DISCLOSE Act. If we act together, we can help to disseminate knowledge and dispel the miasma of misinformation surrounding our political advertising. We can open a space for reason to guide political action in our communities and in our state. Join us now.
Let's give our speaker a hand. We're done a fair amount early today. We have about 15 minutes before. Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Don't forget the letters.
And we have extra paper and envelopes if you have time to write both letters, one to each Perez and Atkins.
I just want to say, one of the, perhaps the most serious problem we have on this planet is the global warming issue. And the global warming is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. And so, but the fossil fuel industry will donate money to Congress and so on to raise doubt about the issue. And so this is where this is on that one particular issue. We need this DISCLOSE Act and ultimately clean money.
That's one of the industries that has the most money.
Right.
And so, yeah, they're behind.
The fossil fuel industry should be listed as the major donors when it's on that big issue.
Okay, I wanted to make an announcement. Unless there's somebody else with a question. Anyone else got one? I have an announcement. Are you going to announce this potluck? Oh, okay. Well, I was asked to announce that there's going to be a Humanist potluck Saturday, 4/26, which I believe is this Saturday. Is that right? At Susan Shallot and Roy Elder's home. They'll put their hands up over there. They have some handouts. You can get some more information about how to get there and all that sort of thing. Okay? And then I guess what you can do is sit at your table until I'll announce when the food's about ready, because otherwise you rush the table. There won't be much there.
Yes, one of the things we always do on Easter is we after the forum and the lunch, we walk around Lake Lagunita. And there are pieces of paper around with directions there, and we could meet here and go up or meet us there.
Okay, well, I guess folks can write their letters or whatever, and I'll make an announcement when the food's about ready. It's going to take about 15 minutes, I suspect, sometimes a little longer. Oh, you have a question? Oh, the basket. What happened to the basket? Oh, it's right down there.
If you finish a letter or are making a donation or whatever, just bring it over to Nancy here. If you find Nancy, you found the right person for all of that. She'll help you get things in the mail or processed.
Yeah, so be sure and put something in it.
When would this go on the ballot? Would it be in the November election?
This is an amendment that's going through the assembly right now. It's not going onto the ballot. It's not going to be a proposition. Yeah. So it's passed the Senate, and it's an amendment to this 1974 California Fair Political Practices Act, and it has to pass the Assembly this summer, having already passed the Senate last year.